As human beings, we love freedom. We don't like to be constrained. We don't like to be boxed in. We like to feel like we get to make our own choices, that we get to set the direction of our lives. And there are many different things. I bet in some ways we would all define freedom for ourselves in a slightly different way. And there's many different levels of freedom. But one thing that we find out, at least it was reinforced for me this week as I read and studied about freedom, that very few people, like a tiny minority of the world's population, would include spiritual freedom in their definition of what freedom means to them. So what is spiritual freedom? You may have a sense intuitively for yourself. Like when I asked people over this last week in different, interactions I had with people, they said it's the freedom to be yourself. And that could be it, but it's probably much more than that. Because when people say, I just want to be free to be myself, most people are really saying to us, I just want to be free to be my ego. Because when we really connect with who we are as spiritual beings, there's not much sense of a self anymore. We're in a beautiful, peaceful, loving flow. And we find that we've defined ourselves through the, quote, sense of self that we have. And of course, that becomes then limiting. So we might be more accurate to say that spiritual freedom is the freedom to claim, to live, to express your full potential as a spiritual being, which is often beyond your wildest dreams, beyond something that you've ever been able to imagine. And so you can imagine to open up to real spiritual freedom requires some work, because we have plenty of limitation that would get in the way of really just claiming our potential. Just think of all the times in your life you've said no to life. In spiritual freedom, we say yes. Some of us in the room were in a retreat together this last summer that was on spiritual freedom. And the presenter, I thought, did a beautiful job of helping us understand or helping us to orient towards spiritual freedom by breaking freedom into three parts. One was the freedom from. You get it, right? What is it that you need freedom from in order to be free? In unity, at least in the unity that I grew up in, it would have been freedom from limiting thoughts. And we could probably tie that back to virtually everything I'm going to say, but it's freedom from patterns that we've taken on, freedom from belief that we have about ourselves, about the world, freedom even from identities that we hold on to. I remember when I was getting ready to retire, several people said to me, it's going to be much harder than you think because you're identified as a minister. Actually, it wasn't so hard for me. I was ready to be done. So you can tell, though, that there are things that we hold on to, right? No, this is me. Even our attitudes about ourselves. That's the things that we have an opportunity to work through. Not only that, but then our issues and our hurts. There's an infinite number of things we could work through to really have complete spiritual freedom. One thing I'll say right now is, thank God, spiritual freedom comes incrementally. Because if we had to wait till we were fully free of all of our issues, might be a few lifetimes. The next sort of segment of freedom that he brought up was freedom two. That's the freedom to express your potential. Isn't it interesting that all of us are expressions of the same Spirit? There's no two spirits. There's only one. It is the texture of our soul that has unique qualities that then makes each of us unique. And yet, we have been programmed to fit in, most of us. Actually, I know there's a few of you that were not programmed to fit in, which made my retirement a lot easier. But for most of us, and it can be subtle, we want to fit in. The culture reinforces not being the uniqueness that we are. When enough spiritual freedom has been unleashed inside of us, we get to begin to explore what we uniquely get to bring to this life experience. And then what? And then what? To bless the world. Because that's the thing that the culture that I grew up in, the culture of the 60s, well, the 60s was starting to break out, right? But the late 50s and the 60s were all about fitting in and not understanding that it's actually our uniqueness that blesses the world. And then the third sort of category of freedom that was brought in was freedom itself. Just simply freedom. And why is it important for us to understand freedom? Because our true nature, or if you're a longtime Unity student, our Christ nature, is free. In fact, it's not even fair to say it's free because that makes it sound like your Christ nature is some kind of entity. It is the Spirit in you, and it is beyond any kind of entityness. It is of the spiritual realm. Your true nature is of God, an expression of God. And as such, it is freedom. And thus, as we make space in our consciousness, as we free up space, let's say, free from, and we begin to live our nature, it is inherently free. And what's cool about the spiritual, is we live in the world, and the world puts so many roadblocks in front of us and so many problems, and it doesn't even faze spirit. Spirit is not limited by anything in the world. That's why as you come to trust who you are as a spiritual being, there's really no problem that can't be solved. Because Spirit is infinite wisdom, infinite knowledge, infinite creator. And so it's important for us to hold to that understanding. When the world does what the world does to us, wait a minute, I'm also, in fact, I am a spiritual being. I am true nature in expression. And while I might be identified and still needing to be free from any little bit of space that's been freed up from the work that I have done, allows that light not only to shine through me, but to be me. And in that I am fortified, I'm strengthened, I'm freed. You can imagine it takes some work. By the way, if you're sitting there going, I wonder if I'm free, you're not. Hate to break the news to you, but... So I'm a big fan. Any of you who are not meeting me for the first time today know I'm a big fan of the process of inquiry, of getting in. You know, the founders of Unity thought if you could just get some mental activity around your limiting belief, you'd be fine. You can transcend it just by knowing it intellectually. But we've learned through great research and through lots of life experience that when you're willing to get in and really feel what's going on, and to explore it from more of a feeling standpoint, then you have the opportunity to have it begin to soften and let go of you. And you know, any given week we could talk about 10 different examples of my life, but I want to talk about a specific one today to use as an illustration. We'll see if I was free or not. So I've been playing pickleball. Any of you guys play pickleball? Oh, good to see that. We should have a Unity pickleball day. So I actually love pickleball. And it's not just playing pickleball that I love. It's very social. It's, you know, you become very close to people. It's really fun. And I've met a lot of people. So I like pickleball. But I noticed, think how, let's say starting about 3 weeks ago, I'm not exactly sure, but driving to pickleball, and I realized that I was experiencing anxiety. And I thought, well, this is odd. I really like this. Why am I anxious? Now, this shows you something about the issues that we have. Many of the issues that we have are historical. So even though our life experience can be different than the issue can get triggered by something that's historical, right? So as I just paused with it as I'm driving, I realized, oh yeah, you know, didn't see myself, well, there was a lot of reinforcement that I wasn't a great athlete when I was a kid. And I hated the shaming, I hated being the last one to be picked, you know, all that stuff. And I wasn't noticing it before, but on these particular days, I started to notice that that young aspect of me, my ego structure, was afraid that this would be the day that I'd be found out for not being a good enough athlete, you know, blah, 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 right? So and driving is not the best place to do a deep inquiry. Just a bit of warning. So I picked it up later. Actually picked it up working with a teacher. And I was quite surprised. Oh, by the way, if I'm feeling anxiety, am I free? No. Why is that? Because spirit never feels anxiety. Your true nature is never anxious. In fact, your true nature, the spirit in you, never experiences any emotions, we might call, that we would judge as negative. It does experience incredible love, incredible satisfaction, but never hurt, never anxiety, never holds on to hatred, never experiences fear. That just shows you just how much work we have to do, right? So as I started to inquire into it and could see all that childhood patterning around wanting to be accepted, and then realizing that I really wanted to be a part of the group that did well in athletics. Didn't have to think anything of it. And my inquiry took this amazing leap. Because just like 3 days before I started this inquiry, I'd met a woman, I was with friends, I met a woman I didn't know. She asked where on the lake I live. I live in Grand Lake. And when I told her, she goes, oh, you live with the cool guys. Oh, you guys have dirty minds. But I'd never thought of it. But I live in this little corner. You can't really, I guess you could kind of call it a bay. It's not the end of the lake. There's just a little corner along the shoreline. And sure enough, we've got a whole group of men that are fathers or husbands that are now in their late 40s and early 50s that have all been incredibly successful. They are great athletes. They get up every time they're there. These are weekenders usually, so they get up at 7:30 in the morning and go water skiing together. They all belong to the yacht club, and they all sail sailboats. They usually get the top awards every year. You know, they are the cool guys, right? And here's what was fascinating to me. So I've really wanted to be a cool guy. And so I'm always kind of working the beach. If they're out on their dock and I'm out paddleboarding, I stop to say hi. I know a lot about them. As I was doing this inquiry, I realized they don't know anything about me. They never stop at my dock, even if I'm out there. I am not included. And yet I've been like a little puppy dog going, welcome me in. Invite me to go skiing at 7:30, can't I be part of the group? And then the inquiry went a little step further, realizing, shit, my parents are cool guys. My dad, super successful at an early age, a star athlete. My mother, beautiful. She was a model when I was a kid. They had hundreds of friends. They had huge parties. Everyone wanted to be their friends. The cool guys. And I'm still trying to fit even into my parents' life. And what's cool about inquiry, and when you're ready for it, what I could see was, it's not working. I have put so much energy in wanting to be a cool guy, energy that could have been put into, like, who am I really? So when we break through and see one of these things, there's always a sense of freedom. We're lifted from a burden that we've been carrying. But here's something that kind of surprised me. I was so entrenched, so identified in this desire to be a cool guy, and kind of unconscious to it, that I felt disoriented. I wanted to throw up. I felt like I was being asked to let go of what I knew was going to be the answer. If I could just be a cool guy, everything would be fine. And so it's important to understand that we're talking about survival kind of stuff often, that these are ideas that have become the pillar of what we stand on instead of standing on spirit. And so not to be surprised that even though it feels freeing, if you don't have some reactivity come up around it, some grief, some sadness, even that realization of how much energy you've put into trying to live a life that's not really your life. The cool guys were here this weekend. We're at the lake this weekend. And I was out for a few minutes on my paddleboard. It was so interesting just to go by, hi guys, and just go on. Just like, I don't need these guys to like me. Won't it be fun if I come back next year and go, guess what? Now that I'm ignoring the cool guys, they're at my dock all the time. I mean, you never know, right? But I've worked with the same teacher for years, I think 30 years. He's quite a character. And he's with me in these processes. So he knows that I'm trying to embrace more of who I am. And he also understands that you got to practice, right? So he'll say to me sometimes, you said that awfully masculinely. can't we get a little gay in here? He makes me do the whole. And it's interesting that it brings up fear in me, it brings up shame. See, I get to see how deeply this whole thing, my dad used to hit me if I was too girly, all this stuff, that it's so programmed in us, and we don't realize that we're not free from it. And it's so wonderful to be said, come on, isn't there take the guardrails off, will you? Sue's going to be angry with me for saying that, but not here in church. Don't take the guardrails off here in church. The other thing that inevitably comes up when we talk about something like this is people come up to me and they say, you mean I can just really do what I want? I really wanted to really tell my boss off, or I want to go rob a bank, or you know what I mean? Now, who in us, of the characters in us, who would be saying that? Ego. That's right. It's important to remember when we say that we're taking the guardrails off, that we're making space for spirit. Remember, ego is edging God out, edging spirit out. And so, spirit in you is always about right action, is always about expressing love. Even if firmness is required in the moment, it will be a loving firmness. Spirit does not go out and rob banks. Spirit will lean in against laws that are not based in truth. Injustices, Spirit will lean into, will get a little ornery with, but not to raise havoc. Instead, to bring peace, right? To bring us back into some loving flow. The Bible says that peace, what does the Bible say? Truth will set you free. The truth will set you free. Sometimes Spirit gets confused in me. The truth is that truth is freedom. No separation. You ever notice that? How scary it can be to really fess up to the truth or to your truth, and yet afterwards to realize it is pure freedom to live in the truth. What are the guardrails that you've been living in? Needing to be nice, can't get angry, can't make more money than my dad. What are the guardrails? It's a good way to begin to start. How am I not free? Take a little bit of inventory of what are the things that you've said no to. I know that this congregation knows that at one point in my tenure here, I was asked if I'd be a keynote speaker at the Unity Convention. And I said yes, and then I said no. I was afraid. Where are the times that you've been afraid? And not to try and cover them up, but to just look at them and say, how could I support myself in not being afraid about this in the future? And why am I afraid? To do that inquiry. Why would we want to do this work? To live as our true nature is like something you've never experienced. The level of satisfaction at doing nearly nothing, at just being, of being untethered, of feeling free. It's pretty unimaginable. And remember, it's incremental. So as you find yourself getting triggered, what a great opportunity to say, aha, the universe is showing me one of the ways that I could be free. Humans love to be free. And while we often think of that as external freedom or freedom to express ourselves, we hardly ever think about the freedom that comes with spiritual freedom. The freedom to fully live the potential that is wanting to express as us, is always unfolding in our life and coming towards us. I say it many times, it's inconceivable about how much God loves you. And God's desire for you is to fully express who and what you are. Namaste.